The email hit my inbox at exactly 11:47 on a rainy Sunday night. The subject line was short, cold, and final. Termination of employment, effective immediately. I was sitting in my home office, staring at the blue glow of my monitor, listening to the steady drumming of the rain against the window pane. I was running the final diagnostic sweeps on 7 years of my life, a project that represented $3.5 billion in advanced defense technology. It was the most sophisticated, autonomous threat detection system the private defense sector had ever produced. My team and I had poured our blood, sweat, and hundreds of sleepless nights into coding, testing, and refining that system. We had lived on bad coffee and takeout pizza for years, driven by the belief that we were building something that would actually save lives on the battlefield. The humming of the servers in my office was the only sound in the quiet house, a familiar background noise that had accompanied me through countless late nights. The termination email was only 3 sentences long. No explanation was given for the decision. No words of gratitude for my years of dedication. Just a blunt command not to return to the facility, along with a notice that all my security credentials would be permanently deactivated at midnight. It was signed by Spencer Albright. He was not the chief executive officer of our company, at least not in the eyes of the people who actually did the work. He was just the founder's son. Spencer was a 34-year-old Harvard business graduate who had spent the last 6 months tagging along behind my team, pretending he wanted to learn the technical side of the defense business. Instead, he spent that time asking endless questions about security protocols, backup servers, and fail-safes. The same Spencer had now decided he did not need me anymore. He thought that 6 months of watching us work had made him an expert and that he could run the entire system without the man who had created it from nothing. I read the email twice. I did not panic, nor did I feel the urge to smash my keyboard. I simply picked up my phone and sent a single text message back to him. "Did you clear the security protocols?" 3 little dots appeared on the screen, vanished, and then appeared again. His reply came through a minute later. "Everything is handled. Do not contact this number again." I leaned back in my office chair, stared at the ceiling, and smiled. Spencer Albright had just made the most expensive mistake of his privileged life. He had no idea how software architecture worked, and he certainly had no idea what was waiting for him in the deep code. My name is Louis Vance. Until about 12 minutes before midnight on that Sunday, I was the chief technology officer and lead architect of Albright Defense Solutions. I am 54 years old, and I have been in the software engineering and cyber defense game for over 3 decades. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Pittsburgh, the son of a steel worker and a nurse. My parents worked opposite shifts, passing each other like ships in the night, with quick kisses and updates about my school projects. But they taught me that your work should mean something. They taught me that integrity is not negotiable. My father used to tell me that if you build something, you build it to last, and you build it to protect the people who rely on it. My mother taught me that helping people is a duty, not a path to fame. Those simple lessons shaped my entire career. When I got into technology, I focused on defense. I did not want to build weapons that took lives. I wanted to build systems that protected people. I wanted to find threats before they happened and save lives. 7 years ago, Albright Defense Solutions was a small contractor trying to survive against corporate giants. They had decent developers, but nothing groundbreaking. I approached the founder, Grant Albright. Grant was a retired Marine officer who started the company with a vision of making defense technology accessible to smaller military units and allied nations who could not afford the massive systems from major contractors. He was a man of honor, a veteran who had seen too many young soldiers lose their lives due to poor intelligence and slow communication. I showed him my threat detection algorithm. We hit it off immediately in a quiet corner of a Washington defense conference. He did not just see a business opportunity, he saw a shield for his fellow soldiers. He offered me a 60-40 split on the profits of the technology, with 60% going to me because I was the creator. I was 47 years old then, and I had finally found a leader who respected my work and understood that the creator should benefit most. We shook hands, and that handshake was stronger than any legal contract we signed later. Over the next 7 years, I built a team of 12 brilliant engineers. We filed 47 patents and created the Athena protocol. The system could analyze satellite feeds, communications, and environmental data to predict threats with a 93% accuracy rate. The Department of Defense valued the project at $3.5 billion. We were 6 months away from signing our largest contract in history when Grant had a massive heart attack. His doctors told him to retire or face the consequences. He had no choice but to step down. The board had to choose a successor. The logical choice was Evelyn Reeves, our chief operating officer who had been Grant's right hand for 10 years. She was a brilliant logistics expert who knew every detail of our operations. But Grant had a son. Spencer Albright was an ambitious young man who believed he was destined to run the empire simply because of his last name. Grant chose his son hoping to build a family legacy. That decision was the beginning of the end. At the very first meeting with department heads, Spencer announced he wanted to expand our software into the commercial market, like smart cities and private corporate security. I tried to warn him that the software used classified military algorithms and that commercial transition was highly restricted under federal defense regulations. He dismissed my concerns, claiming business required flexibility and that engineers were too risk-averse. He did not understand the technology, and he did not care about the legal boundaries. He only saw dollar signs, and he was determined to cash in as quickly as possible, regardless of the consequences. Over the next few months, Spencer kept pushing to sell our technology to private corporations. I kept blocking him, explaining the strict legal boundaries and the immense risks of exposing classified code. He began to view me as a dinosaur, an old engineer standing in the way of his progress. He started making remarks about how the tech industry belonged to the young and agile, not the slow and cautious. He would talk about disruption and synergy during meetings, using all the typical business school buzzwords that made my stomach turn. I ignored his insults because I knew the stakes. If the Athena protocol fell into the wrong hands, it could compromise national security and expose our military to severe danger. I had a responsibility not just to the company, but to the people we were trying to protect. Spencer had this ridiculous idea that we could sell a modified version of the Athena protocol to major retail chains. He wanted to use our predictive algorithms to track customer movements, analyze shopping habits, and predict shoplifting. I had to explain to him, like he was a child, that the software was designed to track military-grade movements, satellite imagery, and encrypted communications, not high school kids in a convenience store. The mathematical models were calibrated for strategic threats, not retail losses. Converting it would cause massive false positives, profiling issues, and legal nightmares. But he just rolled his eyes, convinced that I was being difficult and resisting his brilliant vision for corporate growth. Then, 6 months ago, Spencer suddenly stopped pushing for commercial expansion. Instead, he became obsessed with understanding the underlying code. He began attending our development meetings, asking to see system architecture documents and wanting to know how we managed our databases. I thought he was finally trying to learn, so I gave him access to the high-level overviews. However, I kept the core source code and the security keys locked down. Those required security clearances he did not possess. I should have paid closer attention. His sudden interest was too convenient, but I was busy trying to finalize the military testing phases and preparing the documentation for the Department of Defense. I should have known better. 3 weeks ago, Neil Torres, my lead cybersecurity specialist, whom I had hired away from the National Security Agency, came to my office. Neil looked worried as he closed the door, pulled up a chair, opened his laptop, and showed me the system access logs. Neil had bloodshot eyes, having spent the entire night tracing the IP addresses. Someone with executive credentials had been downloading massive chunks of our proprietary algorithms and source code during the middle of the night. The access points traced back to Spencer's personal devices. Neil confirmed that Spencer had already copied about 70% of the Athena protocol documentation. He was doing it slowly, hoping to avoid triggering the automated alerts. But Neil had built redundant monitoring systems to track any unusual data transfers. He had added these silent alarms after Spencer started showing too much curiosity about our databases. My stomach sank as I realized what Spencer was doing. He was not trying to run the company. He was planning to steal the technology. To make matters worse, Neil discovered that Spencer had been meeting secretly with representatives from Titan Aerospace, our biggest competitor. Neil had uncovered dining reservations and encrypted communication logs showing Spencer was meeting with a Titan executive named Brian Dunlap at an upscale steakhouse downtown. Spencer was going to sell my life's work to the highest bidder for $50 million and a seat on Titan's board of directors. Titan had lost the initial contract bid to us, and they were hungry for a way back in. Spencer was offering them the key to the castle on a silver platter, bypass the years of research we had done, and take all the credit. It was a massive breach of trust and a direct violation of federal laws. We compiled a detailed report of the unauthorized access, the secret meetings, and the downloaded repositories. I requested an emergency meeting with the board of directors. I presented the evidence, showing the clear pattern of corporate espionage. But Spencer was smooth. He argued that as the chief executive officer, he had every right to review company assets and ensure the technology was secure. He claimed the meetings with Titan Aerospace were just exploratory discussions for a strategic partnership that would benefit everyone. The board debated for 3 hours behind closed doors. Afterward, Evelyn Reeves found me in the corridor. Her face was pale, and she looked exhausted. She told me the board was not going to act. Spencer had convinced them that I was just being territorial and resistant to his new leadership, because he was the founder's son. And Grant still held major influence with the main investors. They chose to give him the benefit of the doubt. They told Evelyn they needed absolute proof of malicious intent before they would move against him. They were willing to overlook the red flags to avoid a public scandal that could damage the stock value. I went home that night knowing I was on thin ice, but I had already taken steps to protect my creation. Engineers do not just build systems. We plan for failure. I had designed a failsafe into the Athena protocol from day one. The system required continuous authentication. Every 72 hours, the core system checked for digital handshakes from 4 designated administrators, myself, Neil Torres, Rachel Park, and Winston Wong. If all 4 of us failed to sign in within that 72-hour window, the system would assume a breach had occurred and initiate a defensive lockdown. This was not a standard security feature. It was a custom Guardian program I had written myself in the early stages of development, and it was about to become our primary line of defense. This defensive lockdown was called the Penelope Protocol, named after the mythical figure who unraveled her work each night to keep suitors at bay. If the Penelope Protocol was triggered, the entire source code would fragment, encrypt itself, and scatter across multiple secure military servers. The recovery keys would begin to degrade after a set period, making the software permanently useless to anyone who tried to force their way in. The only way to unlock the system was for all 4 administrators to enter their cryptographic keys simultaneously. It was a beautiful piece of programming, designed to protect the technology from being stolen by hostile nations or greedy executives. The backup nodes were located at secure military installations in Virginia, Texas, and Colorado, ensuring that no local server compromise could allow anyone to rebuild the system. I had mentioned the existence of a basic security protocol in our technical documentation, but I had kept the exact details of the Penelope protocol classified. The full explanation was sealed in a secure folder filed with the Department of Defense as part of our certification. Spencer would have needed active military clearance to read it, which he did not have. He thought he could just fire us and hand the keys to someone else. He had no understanding of the difference between executive power and technical authorization. He assumed that because he was the boss, the computers would obey him without question. He had no idea that my team and I had built a cryptographic fortress that did not care about corporate titles. When Spencer sent the termination emails to my team on that Sunday night, he triggered the countdown. I called Neil immediately. Neil confirmed he had received the same termination notice. I then called Rachel Park and Winston Wong. They had also been dismissed. I met Neil at a local diner early Monday morning. He was eating a plate of eggs and hash browns, laughing when I explained that we were going to let the Penelope protocol run its course. Rachel was nervous about her mortgage, but she quickly agreed when she saw the evidence of Spencer's betrayal. Winston Wong was furious, stating that he would rather see the code burn than let Spencer make a single cent off our work. Winston spent the next hour walking us through the exact timing of the encryption sequences, ensuring that the hardware security modules located in our server room would not accept any manual overrides. We discussed how the cryptographic tokens were tied to a physical key generator situated at the Pentagon, meaning that any attempt to bypass the authentication sequence would require military authorization. We synchronized our watches. The 72-hour timer was ticking, and we were going to let it run out. We were going to let the Penelope protocol do its work, and we would watch Spencer try to explain why the system had suddenly turned into an unreadable mess of encrypted data. By Monday afternoon, I was monitoring the system remotely, using the independent defense contractor channels that were outside of company control. I watched as Spencer realized he was locked out of the core repositories. He brought in a team of external IT consultants from Titan Aerospace to bypass the encryption. They spent all night trying to crack the system, but they got nowhere. They could see the outer directories, but the actual algorithms were locked behind military-grade encryption. They tried brute force attacks, they tried security bypasses, but every attempt only triggered more security layers. Neil and I had set up honeypots, simulated databases filled with useless noise that looked like core code. The consultants spent hours analyzing this garbage data, thinking they were making progress, while the clock continued to tick down. On Tuesday morning, Neil called me from a temporary phone. He told me that Spencer was getting desperate. He had scheduled a major press conference for Wednesday afternoon, where he planned to demonstrate the Athena protocol to international buyers. He had promised them a live demonstration of a system he could not even turn on. His pride was blinding him to the reality of the situation. He thought his outside consultants could crack my security before the deadline. He was selling a dream to cover up his theft. I knew I could not let him ruin the reputation of our technology. The Athena protocol was not just a commercial product. It was a vital defense tool designed to protect soldiers and civilians. I decided to make a phone call to Colonel Sarah Crawford, our primary liaison at the Department of Defense. Sarah was a tough, no-nonsense military officer who understood the strategic value of our software and had no patience for corporate greed. I explained the situation to her in detail. Spencer's unauthorized data transfers, his secret negotiations with Titan Aerospace, our sudden terminations, and the fact that the system was currently locked down. I told her that the Penelope protocol had been triggered and that the entire system would begin its irreversible degradation process if we did not authenticate it soon. Sarah was silent for a long moment, then told me she would request the classified security appendix immediately. She instructed us to remain offline while she coordinated the government's response. She promised to take action and protect the national security interests that Spencer was putting at risk. She understood that if the software fell into Titan's hands, it would quickly be leaked or sold to foreign entities. On Wednesday morning, the day of Spencer's planned press conference, federal agents from the Department of Defense arrived at our headquarters. They carried a warrant to audit all security protocols and investigate unauthorized access to classified military software. Spencer tried to block them at the door, but the lead agent, a stern man named Special Agent Fowler, informed him that blocking a federal audit would result in immediate contract cancellation and criminal charges under the Defend Trade Secrets Act and the Espionage Act. The sight of federal agents marching into the lobby in their dark suits was a shock to everyone in the building. Employees stood in the hallways whispering as the agents took control of the server rooms and Spencer's office. Special Agent Fowler did not care about Spencer's Harvard pedigree or his father's influence. He sat in Spencer's office, reviewing the digital signature logs that Neil's Athena alarms had compiled. Spencer tried to make phone calls to his father's personal contacts, hoping to get the audit halted. But he soon discovered that when national security concerns are raised, political connections are useless. The Department of Defense had designated the Athena protocol as a critical defense asset, and Spencer's unauthorized transfers to private servers had triggered a federal inquiry that could not be brushed aside. The agents spent 3 hours reviewing the access logs. They quickly verified that Spencer had downloaded classified data without proper clearance, and that he had fired the key technical staff in retaliation for reporting the security breach. By noon, Spencer was escorted out of the building by federal agents and suspended from all corporate authority pending a full investigation. He went from planning his big triumph to being led away in disgrace, all before he could show off the technology he had tried to steal. The press conference was canceled, leaving the international buyers confused and angry in the lobby. The board of directors panicked. They realized they were about to lose their $3.5 billion project and face federal prosecution. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Evelyn Reeves called me. She told me the board was begging for a meeting and wanted to know what it would take to get us back. They were desperate, realizing that their golden boy had nearly destroyed the entire company. Lawrence Fleming had tried to make phone calls to his political contacts in Washington, but no one would help him. A national security breach was too hot for anyone to touch. I arrived at the headquarters an hour later. The boardroom was filled with tense faces, including the board members and Colonel Crawford. I did not even sit down. I walked to the screen and displayed the details of the Penelope protocol. I explained that the system was currently 54 hours into the lockdown and that the recovery keys would begin to degrade in less than 18 hours. I showed them the countdown timer, letting them see the seconds ticking away in bright red letters. Lawrence Fleming, a longtime family friend of the Albrights, accused me of holding the company hostage. He called me a traitor to the firm. He was sweating profusely, wiping his forehead with a white handkerchief as he glared at me. I looked him in the eye and told him that I was simply protecting the technology from theft, which was my job. I told him the real traitor was the man who tried to sell military secrets to a competitor. Colonel Crawford supported me, stating that the military recognized the Penelope protocol as a legitimate security measure, and that Spencer's actions were a clear breach of federal defense regulations. She made it clear that if we did not return, the government would cancel all contracts immediately and move the project to another firm. She pointed out that under the federal acquisition regulation clauses, Albright Defense Solutions had failed to maintain the key personnel required to support the classified project, rendering the company in default. Ruth Castellano, a senior board member, asked what my terms were for returning. I laid them out clearly: the permanent removal of Spencer Albright from the company, a seat on the board of directors for myself with veto power over all technology decisions, full reinstatement and back pay for my entire team, and a complete independent audit of corporate security. I was not going to let them sweep this under the rug. I wanted to make sure that no executive could ever threaten our work again. The board members looked at each other. They knew they had no choice. If they refused, the Athena protocol would erase itself, and the company would go bankrupt. Ruth made a motion to accept my terms, and the board voted 5-2 to approve them. I was officially reinstated as the Chief Technology Officer and appointed to the board. I immediately called Neil, Rachel, and Winston. We met in the server room at 5 o'clock. The room was cool, humming with the sound of the cooling fans, smelling of ozone. We entered our cryptographic keys simultaneously into the main terminal. The Penelope protocol verified our identities, and the system began to reassemble itself. By Wednesday night, the Athena protocol was fully operational, and the diagnostics showed zero data loss. We had saved the project, and we had saved the company from Spencer's greed. The system was secure once more, and my team was back where we belonged. On Thursday morning, Spencer and his lawyer demanded a meeting with the board, claiming wrongful termination and accusing me of sabotage. His lawyer was a slick corporate attorney named Donald Vance, no relation to me, thank goodness. He tried to bully the board, arguing that Spencer was simply exercising executive oversight when he downloaded the files and that my security protocol was an unauthorized sabotage of company property. I sat at the table as a voting board member, watching Spencer's face turn pale as he saw me sitting there. His lawyer threatened to sue the company for millions of dollars, but I simply slid the federal audit documents across the table. The documents contained records of Spencer's text messages and emails with Titan Aerospace, proving he had planned to sell our classified algorithms. Neil had managed to retrieve the backup logs from Spencer's personal cloud server, which the federal agents had seized during their audit. The emails showed Spencer discussing the specific details of the Athena protocol's predictive engine with Brian Dunlap. Spencer had offered to hand over the complete source code in exchange for a $50 million buyout and a vice president position at Titan. It was black and white evidence of trade secret theft and corporate espionage. Colonel Crawford, who was present, informed Spencer that the government was opening a criminal investigation under the Defend Trade Secrets Act of 2016 and federal laws governing espionage. She explained that because the Athena protocol was classified, Spencer's actions fell under the jurisdiction of the Espionage Act. Spencer's lawyer took one look at the emails, realized the severity of the situation, and advised his client to remain silent. The threats of lawsuits vanished in an instant, replaced by the realization that Spencer was facing serious federal charges. The corporate attorney quickly packed his briefcase and escorted Spencer out of the room. Spencer was officially terminated from the company. The board offered me the chief executive officer position, but I declined. I am an engineer, not a businessman. I prefer the quiet of the lab to the politics of the boardroom. I recommended Evelyn Reeves for the job, and the board agreed. She had earned it through her hard work and loyalty over the past 10 years. Under her leadership, the company quickly stabilized and employee morale returned to normal. I returned to my lab to focus on building technology that saves lives. Spencer eventually agreed to a plea deal to avoid prison time, resulting in heavy fines, probation, and a permanent ban from working on any government contracts. His career in the defense sector was over. He moved away to Florida, far from the world of technology, and began working in commercial real estate. He learned the hard way that title and pedigree do not give you the right to steal other people's labor. He had tried to take a shortcut to wealth and power, but he ended up losing everything. 6 months later, Grant Albright reached out to me. We met for coffee in a quiet shop near the river. He apologized for letting his family loyalty cloud his judgment. He looked older and humbler than before, the stress of the scandal having taken a toll on his health. He told me he was glad I had protected his legacy and the company he built. I told him I was just doing my job, and we parted on good terms. He was looking older, but his mind was clear, and he respected the boundary I had drawn. He realized that family loyalty should never override basic integrity, and he thanked me for saving Albright Defense Solutions from bankruptcy. I spent the next few years mentoring young programmers, including a brilliant developer named Kelly Wu, who shared my dedication to ethics and innovation. Kelly Wu had grown up in similar circumstances, the daughter of immigrants who worked long hours to give her an education. She had a passion for coding that reminded me of my own younger days. Kelly eventually developed a breakthrough in quantum encryption that made the Athena protocol completely secure against external attacks. She represented the next generation of engineers who understood that technology should serve humanity, not just corporate greed. Today, the Athena protocol is deployed across multiple military branches and allied networks, saving countless lives by preventing threats before they happen. In my office, I keep a large map pinned to the wall. Each pin represents a deployment of the system, a threat neutralized, a soldier who returned home safely, or a civilian community spared from violence. That map is the true measure of my work, far more valuable than the $3.5 billion valuation the bankers put on the company. Spencer tried to build a career on shortcuts and theft, and he ended up with nothing. I focused on integrity, collaboration, and protecting what we built, and we changed the industry. That is not just revenge. It is good engineering. It is the realization that the systems we create must have safeguards built into their very foundations, not just to protect them from external hackers, but from the greed of those who hold executive power. If you believe that protecting your work is just as important as building it, I would be honored if you would subscribe to this channel. We are building a community of people who value honesty and hard work. Thank you for listening, and remember to always build protection into your life's work. Sometimes the best defense is the one you build in silence, and the sweetest victory is watching the system work exactly as you designed it to do.